The longbow versus the crossbow. Which weapon truly ruled medieval warfare? Although bows and crossbows were used for hundreds and thousands of years, I'm going to be specifically talking about longbows versus crossbows during medieval European warfare. To compare them, I will be using multiple metrics, including range, rate of fire, penetrating power, training requirements, and expensiveness. And finally, to reveal the winner, I'm going to add them all up and explain their battle application. First off, let's look at range. Medieval longbows, particularly the English longbow, were renowned for their impressive range. Historical evidence and modern reproductions suggest that skilled archers could achieve distances of 250 to 350 yards. However, the effective killing range of longbows was generally considered to be around 200 yards, although this could vary depending on factors such as weather, conditions, and the archer's skill. Crossbows, on the other hand, have a more complex answer in terms of range. Early medieval crossbows were almost always outranged by longbows. However, as the medieval period progressed, crossbow technology improved significantly, leading to increased power and range. 15th century crossbows were known to be able to launch bolts up to 400 yards, and potentially more, which would likely outperform most longbows in terms of maximum distance. However, it's crucial to note that maximum range and effective combat range are not the same. While a crossbow might be able to shoot a bolt over a great distance, its effective range, the distance at which it could not only accurately hit a target, but also actually puncture whatever armor and kill the target, was typically much shorter, around 180 to 200 yards, while a longbow was usually a bit further, around 220 to 250 yards. So overall, I'm giving the longbow an 8 out of 10 for range, and the crossbow a 5 out of 10. Next, rate of fire. It is generally believed that skilled longbowmen could outshoot a crossbowman around 10 times in a minute. So for every minute, a longbowman could shoot around 10 to 12 arrows, while a crossbowman could only shoot 1 to 2 bolts. However, that is only at the extreme, where the firing rate is being tested at its max. In reality, the rate of fire would be much closer. You see, since it takes no strength to hold back the crossbow, you would get way less tired shooting it for hours compared to the longbow, where even shooting it at half your max fire rate, around 6 arrows per minute, could gas you out in mere minutes. So in practice, nearly at all times, longbowmen would not shoot at their max fire rate. In fact, their fire rate could even be less than the crossbow. If multiple crossbowmen stand in a line, one can shoot while the others reload their weapon. Or if a person has 2 crossbows, he can shoot while another person helps reload his second weapon. In these scenarios, crossbowmen could keep up a sustained rate of fire without any of them actually exerting their strength to fire the weapon. Now, archers with bows could do this too, but that is one example of a way a squad of men with crossbows could keep up a good fire rate. Additionally, the amount of arrows at one's disposal will also determine your fire rate. At the beginning of the battle, you don't want to unleash all of your arrows at once. You generally want to allow a sustained rate of fire throughout the battle. So although a max speed of the longbow would absolutely destroy the crossbow in rate of fire, in practice the difference was much less. So I am giving the longbow a 6 out of 10 and the crossbow a 3 out of 10 in rate of fire. Next up, penetrating power. The draw weight between crossbows and longbows was massive, especially during the later medieval times, around the 14th and 15th centuries, when some crossbows had a draw weight of up to 1,400 pounds, though for the most part crossbows would generally have a draw weight of 700 to 1,000, while most longbows were typically around 80 to 180 pounds. However, a crossbow's draw weight was mostly to compensate for it being a way shorter string than a traditional bow, so the actual penetrating power is not as big as you might think. Additional factors such as arrow type of armor, and range you were at can affect the outcome. Due to limited supply and the logistics of arming a lot of troops, many soldiers wore weakened armor. Additionally, other soldiers wouldn't be wearing any plate armor or chainmail armor, just leather and padding, so longbows, especially equipped with bodkin point arrows, could potentially pierce multiple types of armor. However, overall, it seems that the crossbow does penetrate armor better, so I'm giving it a 7 out of 10 and the longbow a 5 out of 10. Next, Training requirements. Despite its advantages, the longbow was limited by the need for extensive training. Some nations with a culture around longbows, like England and Wales, maintain a strict policy of archery practice. In fact, English King Edward III's archery law of 1363 declared, "Whereas the people of our realm, rich and poor alike, were accustomed formerly in their games to practice archery, whence by God's help, it is well known that high honor and profit came to our realm, and no small advantage to ourselves in our warlike enterprises, that every man in the same country, if he able-bodied, shall upon holidays make use in his games of bows and arrows, and so learn and practice archery." These laws required men to train regularly from a young age, usually around 7, ensured a steady supply of skilled archers. But if they were wiped out, they were very difficult to replace. Not only was learning the actual skill of the longbow difficult, but it also required immense strength. Longbowmen weren't just trained, they were built for war. The physical demands of using a longbow were substantial, with draw weights ranging from 80 to 180 pounds. This high draw weight meant that years of practice were needed to develop the necessary muscle mass and skill to effectively shoot. In fact, the longbow often deformed people. Today, we can see the physical toll of the longbow in the skeletal remains of archers, which often showed thick left arms, wrists, and shoulders with a distorted spine. The crossbow, by contrast, could be used effectively with only a few weeks or months of training, making it a much more accessible weapon for the average person. Unlike the longbow, which requires muscle mass and strength along with accuracy, the crossbow only requires accuracy. If you give a crossbow to a person, within the first day they could actually shoot it. Probably not accurately, but they could at least launch a bolt. Compare that to a person who was new to the longbow. They would struggle to even draw their bowstring back, let alone hit anything accurately. This is ultimately why crossbows became very popular across many European nations. Crossbowmen, however, were still expected to be competent soldiers, capable of operating effectively on the battlefield. So many of them were still training hard, learning about their weapon and all the mechanical aids needed for drawing it. Overall, I am giving the longbow a 1 out of 10 for training requirements and the crossbow a 9 out of 10. Lastly, expensiveness. As you can imagine, the longbows made simply of wood were much cheaper than crossbows. Although many longbows were actually made of hardened and cured wood that would take around 4 years to create. But ultimately, devices used to draw the crossbow string, like the stirrup and windlass, were not only expensive, being made of iron or steel, but they were also very complicated to make. In fact, the entire crossbow was simply more complex and more expensive to make than the longbow. So it most likely broke down a decent amount in the field, and if you didn't know how to fix it, or have the right tools to fix it, you simply couldn't shoot. While this could happen to the longbow, the string or wood being broken, the crossbow's mechanics, in my opinion, were much more open to failure. Another point in terms of expensiveness is reusability. If 100 longbowmen die, their bows pretty much become useless unless you can find well-trained men very soon after. But if 100 crossbowmen die, you can easily reuse the weapons by arming inexperienced men very soon after. Overall, I am giving the longbow an 8 out of 10 and the crossbow a 3 out of 10 in expensiveness. So which one is better? Well, it depends on the terrain, the nation's resources, and the enemy's troops. But that is boring, so after adding up all the scores, out of a score of 50, the longbow got a 28 and the crossbow got a 27. So I personally would have to say overall, the longbow is more applicable in more battle situations. The main drawbacks of the longbow are the training requirements and penetrating power, but it beats the crossbow in terms of range, rate of fire, and expensiveness. And the only one where the crossbow dominates is at training requirements, since I explained the longbow could generally penetrate the same armor as a crossbow could. In medieval battles, we can literally look at how the longbow beat the crossbow. During the 100 Years' War, the English and Welsh archers decimated the French and Genoese crossbowmen at the battles of Agincourt and Crécy. That is because in a longer range, open field engagement, like most European battles were, the longbow dominates. Additionally, the rate of fire made it easy to unleash mass volleys against advancing enemies. Of course, the culture of England made it easy to amass skilled longbowmen, whereas in other nations less emphasis was placed on it, and thus fewer men were able to fulfill the role. However, the crossbow definitely has its place. In siege warfare, the crossbow dominates. Since you can charge it up, during a siege you can wait behind a wall or barricade and easily surprise the enemy by quickly shooting and then ducking back behind cover, without exposing yourself as much as you would with a longbow. The simple ability to shoot your weapon at any time was very powerful at a time in history where other weapons could not do that. Additionally, the crossbow required less space to use effectively, making it perfect for close quarters urban siege fighting. All that being said, the optimal choice for equipping your army is probably the crossbow. Only a few countries, mostly Wales and England, had long-standing traditions in longbows that went back generations. For most countries in Europe, the ease of simply giving your soldier the crossbow outweighed the potentially better range, fire rate, and expensiveness of the longbow. In most scenarios, it is better to have 100 crossbowmen than 25 longbowmen, but that is just my opinion. Comment below what you prefer.